So welcome. Today I have Kelly Dockrell Brown, who is a corporate executive recruiter, and she also wrote a book. And for those of you who've been following my podcast, there's a whole lot of personal journey and professional journey intertwined for most people. They're inextricably linked, and Kelly's an ideal person to kind of share that story. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into recruiting, and then how you decided to write a book that
Yeah,
tells much of your personal world?
absolutely. It's a long story, but I'll try to share like the Cliff Notes version,
Okay.
which we have to go back, way back. All right, so when I went away to college, like most kids probably are relatable to this. We go away to college, we don't know what we want to do when we grow up. So my father was a pharmacist, and my stepmother was the VP of sales for McKesson, pharmaceutical company at that time.
Hmm.
So when I went to college, they said, "All right, Kel, you're going to go to college, get your, generic degree, and when you come out, you'll be a pharmaceutical sales rep because Kelly, you are a salesperson." So I was like, "Yeah, sure, cool, sounds great." Long story short, I was in college in Miami, and for whatever reason, I realized way back when that they weren't hiring sales reps directly out of college. And I don't know where I got that wisdom from. So, fortunately enough, my college had a career center. So I went on interviews with like 15 different companies. Sure enough, I walked into what they would call in the industry, which is an NVOCC, which is a freight term for a company that assists in importing ocean containers from all over the world. So it's essentially a freight forwarder. So interviewed with a company and they said, "Kelly, do you know what a container is?" And I said, "Nope." And sure enough, they hired me because you could tell I was hungry and I wanted to get into sales and learn. Didn't know the first thing about the industry. So fast forward, I was doing this as an internship just to get sales experience. And turns out I was still a college student, got hired by a much bigger company because of my background. And I started making a lot of money doing outside sales in the industry. So I basically fell into this career of logistics transportation in the freight industry as a global sales executive, even though that wasn't my path. So I guess kind of what happens, which is interesting, is like you just get stuck there. A lot of people can probably relate where you're waking up one morning, 5, 10 years later, and you're like, wait, what am I still doing this for? This was supposed to be like a college gig, but made a lot of money and just especially in the freight industry, once you gain all that wisdom and knowledge and become an expert, it's hard to walk away from. So luckily, because of that job, I did have the opportunity to relocate a few times. I lived in Dallas, I lived in Atlanta, I got to travel the world, got really heavily involved in aviation aerospace, which is like shipping aircraft engines all over the world. So I became like this big corporate global executive. The caveat to that, especially with moving and being so busy with work, was I was single all throughout my 20s and then early 30s. And that aspect of my life made me very unhappy. So it's funny, like even back then, I would have recruiters call me and I felt stuck when I was working my career in Miami. And I'd say, look, if you can offer me an opportunity to get out of Miami and relocate, like I'll take it because dating is terrible here.
Mhm.
So throughout all the moving around in my career, and kind of coming to like the end of that and still miserable and single, I had to really look and find the common denominator in my singledom was me. And even though I lived in different locations and dated, I like that was like the one piece of my life that wasn't successful. And at the same time, I wasn't thrilled to be in logistics transportation.
Mhm.
But like to everybody else, I was living my best life. I'm 30 years old. I have a six-figure base salary. Like that's a big deal back then. So, but nevertheless, back in 2017, I had basically what I would describe as like a spiritual awakening. And I felt like I was called by my faith and my God to basically quit my job and move to Hawaii. So I did. I called my boss. I basically got this calling on like a Saturday, called my boss on a Monday, quit, left the company, and I moved to Hawaii and really had this kind of tumultuous journey getting there. And it took me from the time I quit my job to the time I arrived in Hawaii, like 4 or 5 months. So I lived homelessly, like going across country. So big corporate executive, living this fancy life, eating steaks and caviar to like eating ramen in the middle of the wilderness on this jaunt to Hawaii. So long story short, I did make it to Hawaii, and then it was kind of about like self-discovery and pivoting. I ended up becoming like the number one requested DJ for like big events and weddings in Hawaii. So I was like DJ Killikells, total shift from obviously like my past life. And then it's interesting because I did leave logistics, transportation, like gone. But then one night, this was during a time, so this was like 2021. I was really heavily deep in meditation because I couldn't sleep. And it got downloaded into me to launch Acclaim Recruiters, my recruiting company, without knowing the first thing about it. So had the vision, launched it the next day, and then within about 4 months, it was profitable and up and running. And the interesting thing was I was able to take that 15 years of my life that I spent in my career in logistics transportation and then utilize that to come full force in recruiting. And yeah, so now that's mainly my niche and my vertical within the industry.
Well, it's interesting because, um, I know that LinkedIn, I don't know if saturated is a word, but there are a lot of recruiters using LinkedIn and other platforms. But I don't know much about recruiting, but I think having a background in an industry gives you a perspective that the person who comes right out of human resources or what have you, or is a career coach, hopefully they have a background in something else. But it's nice to be a subject matter expert, understand that industry before you move into something that helps shape another industry or other people's careers. I mean, I'm familiar with headhunters, but I'm not so much familiar with the recruiting industry. Although you have a huge following on LinkedIn, people looking for jobs should actually reach out to you on LinkedIn. But it's a great platform, right, for recruiting. I mean, it's very sophisticated now in that regard.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, if you follow like Gary Vee, he'll tell you 2024, 2025, the key platform for professionals is going to be LinkedIn. And I've been utilizing LinkedIn since 2007. So the almost 22,000 connections that I have through the platform are all from, all these years. So what, 18 years, almost 20 years on the platform. And yeah, it's definitely a game changer. It gives you a phenomenal reach, but also you have to utilize it to build credibility. Whether you're in logistics transportation, selling the movement of freight, or whether you're in recruiting. And I kind of tell like other business owners, as well as other recruiters and anybody in the industry, like you have to post because you're a brand, you have to bring people to awareness of who you are. And the irony about it that people don't really understand is that people will post content, post a video, talk about who they are, their company, what they do, but then they don't get any likes or comments and they feel as though people don't see their content. And that's absolutely not the case. I mean, when I post something on LinkedIn, I might get a few likes, but behind the scenes, I'm getting a lot of messages from people saying, "Hey, I liked your content. Hey, I'm looking for a job and I'm hiring," or what have you. So you do have to be consistent being on it and have a good message.
Yeah, I think engagement is a little lower outwardly, but people definitely engage behind the scenes. In fact, I'm going to invite you. I have a subject matter expert group that's relatively new, and I've got all these people. They don't engage terribly much, but a lot of people are viewing the content, and part of it is creating posts. There's a whole art and science to making a post catchy and interesting, etc. So, well, let's talk about your book. What got you to the book? Because that's a big undertaking.
Yeah. Okay. So I
Sorry,
live,
I jump around. It's an
I love it.
ADHD trait.
That is trust me, that's the story of my life, but it works especially for the business that I'm in. I'm like, I'm somebody that like I don't sit still and I don't get bored. I'm always working on some sort of project. If you know me, I'm always doing something. So, long story short, I had this wild thing happen in my life in 2017 that basically, like, you can imagine if I had like 21,000 connections on LinkedIn, I had a career based on 15 years of like blood, sweat, and tears that I put into the logistics industry and the aviation industry. So when I quit my job to move to Hawaii and everybody found out about it, it was like nuts. Like, it was one day, I'm done, I'm out. So some people kind of rumor that, and I had lost a lot of weight during that time too. So people kind of rumored maybe I had like, I don't know, some sort of disease or terminal illness. I don't know. So I had this crazy story, and then I had a very humbling journey moving from my corporate life to Hawaii. I mean, I was eating humble pie the entire way there. So, because it was such a profound thing that happened to me that was like completely life changing, I felt in 2018 that the Lord told me to write it. And it, like, when you think about writing a book, and I used to write a lot when I was a lot younger. When you think about writing a book, it's such a big undertaking because you're like, where do I start? What do I talk about? How do I formulate this into words to make it make sense to a reader? And I remember when I felt the calling to write the book, I saw a post or a quote, and it said something like, start with one step, one page, one glass of water, like start with one. So I was like, all right, if I write a page a day, then in a year I'll have 365 pages. So I did. I would just start writing, and I became almost like an addiction to write. And then I have a journal that I keep. It's a devotional journal, and I'd put down the word count that I had for the day. So maybe, in 2018, I probably had like 50,000 words by now. So I finished writing the book and I told the story. And then I just kind of like, all right, well, I wrote a book and it's done. So and then my book is really a testimony of faith and putting yourself out there and believing, whether it's in your God or within the universe or whatever it is, but believing that you're not stuck in your circumstances. Like, it's faith, it's boldness, it's really just going out there fearlessly and courageously to go after getting unstuck. And for me, I was in golden handcuffs. So yeah, so I wrote the book and then I just let it sit. So then about a year ago, I felt like the Lord woke me up in the morning and asked me to finish my book. So I did. I went to like a Kinko's and I printed the whole thing out and I read it and I was like, whoa, this is a wild story. I couldn't believe it was my story. But the point of the story was supposed to have a happy ending. So when I wrote it back in 2018, I didn't have a happy ending yet. It was kind of like the story that was being told back then was like, give up all of your money and your life and all of your belongings, move to Hawaii and become a DJ. Ta-da! So that wasn't the fulfillment of the story. So yeah, needless to say, once I did decide to like put on that hat and put it together, pursue it, I was proud with the end result. I don't have kids, so like when you actually like publish a book and you hold it in your hands for the first time,
Mhm.
it it feels like I gave birth to this thing. It's wild.
Right.
And just to see it, there's a lot to it. Um, so yeah, I was able to check that box. I'm a published author.
Yeah, no, congratulations. I mean, I think I think when you're in the recruiting industry, I keep going back to that, but it's so uh, your livelihood and your career is such a part of people's identity that for you to be able to kind of pivot, as I call this, the Great American Pivot, this episode, on behalf of your what you've done and accomplished. I think it's so important to be able to inspire people looking to change or grow or what have you. And I know for me, I was so attached to what I used to do. And that was my identity. And I don't, I'm not sure that there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but there are healthier ways. There were healthier ways for me to pursue avocations and vocational interests that were more creative. And I'm glad that I did it. It was a rocky road, but it's inspiring to hear a recruiter kind of talk about this. And I want to catch up with you more about offline about LinkedIn because I'm fascinating with this platform. People
Yeah, it's
aren't
unbelievable.
using it, like people are not aware of what they can get out of it. It's not a Facebook or Instagram. It's really got a lot of sophisticated features for networking. Uh,
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, look, as a recruiter, we still submit resumes. That's your go-to when you're submitting a candidate to your client. You're always going to submit a resume. But like, look, I tell everybody, your LinkedIn profile is your online resume.
hmm.
And that should be, when I open up your LinkedIn, it should be a representation. Should take me a couple seconds to know who you are and what you do. And that in and of itself, especially in today's climate market, like it's an absolute game changer. So
Oh, speaking of which, like your LinkedIn, I'm sorry, your background with your name, your company. Like, I try to talk to my clients about like using the real estate that's available to you. It's amazing how many people don't even have their name on the Zoom. Or, it's not a criticism, but it's such a great opportunity. Like right now, you're showcasing what you kind of that you're a recruiter because your logo's up there. I mean, my logo's a little absurd. I need to work on it, but
that's
the
great.
point is the real estate, it's great real estate, just like a LinkedIn banner is your real estate. Take advantage of it.
100%.
This kind of branding is really important, and I'm just amazed that people aren't doing it. And maybe it's because for those people who've been in a field for 20, 30 years and have not had to think about personal branding, it just doesn't come naturally to them. But the real estate, the digital real estate is important. So you're a great example. Not that
I
that's what
appreciate
we're going
that.
to talk about, but
No, it is. And I post these really short, quick videos on my LinkedIn. And I posted one a couple days ago and I said, you're a brand. You yourself, I don't care if you work for a company or if you're an entrepreneur or if you're an author or whatever you are, you yourself, you are a brand. And it's the same reason when I say Tony Robbins, we all know who Tony Robbins is. Why? Because we keep seeing him constantly, consistently in your face. He knows his brand. So I think when people take accountability for that, and this younger generation, I think that they're utilizing platforms like TikTok and they're a dancer and influencer. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like you as a professional, what you put out there in the world. And especially too, one of the things that I'm very strategic at is people want to get to know you. Like people know I'm a recruiter, obviously. Kelly Dockrell, Kelly Brown, Acclaimed recruiters. But I post photos of me and my husband, the things that we like to do on the weekends. I posted that, I dropped some weight. I posted a nerdy photo of me rollerblading because now it's more authentic and people are getting to know me, the real me, and not thinking that I'm just trying to shove recruiting contract down your face. So, or down your throat.
yeah, it's really interesting. There are people that have, you know, you can learn branding, but I sense that you had a knack for branding before you even started to perhaps do it in the digital, because neither of us are digitally native, I suppose. Um, but
That's a good point, generationally speaking.
yeah, I mean, I just think everything should have, something that identify, like if you're putting content out there, name it. People want ownership for so many things and they name it. Your book is part of your brand. It's an extension of you, of course, but
Yeah.
you're associated with that book, that title. And so
And it's the title is the same. So I have Acclaimed Recruiters and then I have Acclaimed Journey to Aloha. So I use that same. And here's a tip. So one of the things when you ask me like how I got into recruiting, so back in 2014, I read a book by Tim Ferriss. So
mhm.
a lot of people know Tim Ferriss. He came out with the brilliant book, The 4 Hour Work Week, years ago. The irony about that book is that it's still relevant today. Like he was teaching about VAs or virtual assistants over a decade ago, and it's still something that people really haven't tapped into. So anyhow, the one takeaway I had from that reading that book was, all right, think about your career, and like, what's the greatest asset as it relates to your job? And I was like, oh, easy. I'm a networker. I could put two people together for purpose. So I actually took that back in 2014. And when I was still in Miami, I launched a matchmaking company, which was fun. And it was, you know what? My takeaway from that was I learned a little bit about putting together a business. Um, and it was kind of a wonky environment if you've ever dealt with people trying to date in South Florida. The girls want to date the athletes, and then the guys that make like $30,000 a year want to date the models. So it was that part of the business wasn't good. But it's funny because I think I recognized back then that I was really supposed to pivot back then into recruiting, but I guess it just wasn't my time. So the interesting thing too, and I want to say, I want to give credit to maybe a Tim Ferriss, but the matchmaking company that I opened, I called it Allure Matchmakers because I wanted my companies to start with an A. So if for whatever reason,
Mm,
we're in a pamphlet or, we're whatever, I want my companies to start with an A because I want to be first. I want to appear first. And people are like, well, that doesn't matter. It's the SEO. I'm like, hey, it's just how I see business. I know how I got it. I used to have a client back in Miami and they were called 4A's import export. And I was like, why is it called 4A's? And he's like, because we're gonna appear first if you look us up in like the yellow pages or whatever. So that's where Acclaim came from. But the reason for Acclaim and the word itself for me personally is just me putting like God as the source of my company. And it's because I acclaim him and his sovereignty.
mm,
And when you're a business owner, you could say that openly. So,
right,
you know, it's faith-based for me. But, obviously it's like non-judgmental.
right.
So yeah, that's where all that comes from. And sorry for kind of getting off topic there.
No, it's great. I mean, I try to convey to people all the time. I mean, Google, this is getting really kind of off on a tangent, but I think it would be interesting to you is that Google has a Google Knowledge Panel, a knowledge panel feature. So when you Google someone today, you know, algorithmically or through algorithmic influences, if you will, um, they will consolidate your information from the Google Knowledge Graph and put it all together. People generate them without knowing it, but they can curate it if they're aware. And there's so many little tips and tricks. I share this on my other podcast series, which is also new. How you can use the digital real estate and search engine marketing tactics to really just promote. Like, for example, your book. I'm sure if you haven't already, you'll generate a Google Knowledge Panel because of your book, right? And that will import data from Amazon. And so when people Google your name, um, uh, and you have now a common name, your maiden name is a little more unique, but there's tricks there, right? To make sure that you
Right.
hold on to that audience, people who know you. So there's all kinds of ways that, like you said, I mean, it's brilliant that you picked A when you said that, because most people wouldn't even think of that. You have
Yeah.
a marketing savvy that has really helped you clearly. Um,
Yeah, sometimes you know what, when I first launched a company, I was doing, I when I actually another job I had when I was living in Hawaii was I was hired as like the marketing director for a golf course. Which was great because it was like the side gig. I got like 15 bucks an hour and I got to play free golf. And, it's a dream job for a lot of men to probably work in at a Hawaiian golf course and play free golf. But that's where I actually learned to use Canva and learned how to do all the marketing through Canva. So when I launched Acclaim Recruiters, I was doing a lot of those types of marketing posts. And then I said, all right, you know what, Cal, it's time to really put yourself out there and speak and be authentic and talk to the camera and share your knowledge. And I'll tell you what, when you first start, I mean, you can probably relate to this. Like you do have to, build up your nerves to put your face, open up your camera, put your face out there and talk to yourself by yourself. And you have to be consistent with it. And the more that you do it, the more comfortable that you get. You flip over your camera, talk for 38 seconds, and then you're posting. So I think that just being consistent with that is going to definitely help with branding and your message because anytime somebody thinks of me, I want them to think, oh, you know what? I know a girl that hires for that industry. It's Kelly. Of course, it's Kelly. And I like what you said. I appreciate you acknowledging that. So, look, I spent 39 years of my life as Kelly Dockrell, very distinguishable. Then, of course, you're right. I got married in December. I'm proud that I married my husband, and I'm Kelly Brown. But now I'm like one of a billion. So it is. I'm still kind of like on both sides of that fence because, yeah, recognizably, I'm Kelly Dockrell, and that's the brand that I put out there. But of course, I am a proud wife that wants to, be one with my husband and have his name. So, but the truth is, like, I published the book under Kelly Dockrell. I ran it by my husband, obviously, and I was like, look, I'm going to publish the book with my maiden name.
Mhm.
And that's because that's who I was when I wrote it.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, and by the way, there are all kinds of ways for you to hold on to the name. Uh, Search engines, consider the entity and they will identify you with both names ultimately. Like I was just working on a client's IMDb today. IMDb is the International Movie Database. Some people have credits under one name and then they get married. Well, you can merge them, and there's all kinds of little things that people can do. So I don't know that that's so much a problem, but it's something that can be curated at this point. So you have opportunities to work with that. Um, yeah, I mean, well, what's kind of funny, what you said is the whole notion of putting yourself out there, right? I was a little I was a little hesitant to just do I was a little hesitant to just start creating content, video content in particular, and then I realized, wait a second, people have enough trouble just getting folks to look at their website or whatever. It's not like everyone in the world is jumping on YouTube to look at my content. They don't care enough. In fact, my biggest problem should be getting them to look at all, right? And so people get hung up about that, and then at the same time, they need to kind of back away and think, hey, if I just put something out there, um, you know, as long as it's within reason, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just want you want the traffic. So
yeah.
there's two sides. It's polarizing, right? You've got the people that are afraid to post. People probably post too much, but the people who post too much are getting traffic. So
Yeah. Yeah. I said it in a post that I put up the other day, and I was just talking about like your brand. You need to post. I share like I don't get that much engagement on my post. Like people aren't stopping to like my post,
right,
but people are seeing it. And I even said in my post, I'm like, look, the truth is that you need to open up your camera. I'm like, what happens when you're scrolling through? You see my stupid face all the time.
right,
Like that's what it is. You're gonna know my face. You're gonna see my face. Maybe it pisses you off. Too bad. It's not going to stop me from posting. I'm having a bad hair day. I didn't put my face on. Like, you're still going to see me and I'm going to be in your face because there might come a time where you need a job and it just so happens that you remember seeing my stupid face all the time. So that's really what it comes down to. You can't
yeah,
Unfortunately, I do come from me and my husband kind of joke that we're from the last of the best generation because we're 90s kids.
mhm.
So we didn't grow up with like the social media and the Google or anything like that. So we don't kind of take a deep dive into like what people think so much. You do obviously just try to put it out there that like you are helpful, you're an expert in what you do. Obviously, within the recruiting community, like I posted today, I'm like, I'm a recruiter that's not going to force you to take a job. If you get an offer for one of my clients, or if you get an offer in general and you choose not to take the job, you don't owe anybody an explanation. Like, you don't owe me an explanation. You don't owe anybody. Like, so I think for me, I just try to be authentic in the fact that, like, look, I'm an expert with what I do. I'm here to help. It's obviously no cost to anybody just to have a conversation with me. And I think that like that's the message that I try to convey. And of course, the other point is like you are trying to find your voice. So, are you trying to be, really kind of in your face and authoritative, or are you being a little bit more like relaxed and sweet and professional? So I think anybody that is posting a lot of content, you do kind of play around with it. Like what's working for me? Where am I seeing like the most traffic, so to speak?
Yeah, you got to be flexible. You can't be rigid. You've got to test the market. And uh, I struggled with that a little bit, but as you said, not everyone's going to engage. Like for me in the subject matter expert group, which I'm going to invite you to, um, some of these people, no one's left the group, and to me, that's great news. They may not be liking everything, but they haven't left the group. And so that to me is a better, a decent indicator. Although some people are really heavy on the analytics, um, that data is important, but it can be misleading. So,
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I would definitely be interested to be involved in that. I think the other good thing that LinkedIn offers is that, you can imagine across like 21,000 connections, like there's so many different interactions and engagement and diversity, really. So, um, yeah, I mean, I love it. And of course, like with me and going kind of pivoting back to the great American pivot, I think for me, my message and then trying to inspire others really is like, dude, life is so short. Do not get stuck in life, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, whether it's even geographically. I mean, as a recruiter, I'm talking to people that live all over the country. And I talked to a guy before I got on the call with you, and he's living in Minnesota. And he's like, yeah, me and the wife were really hoping to move someplace warm. Go do it. People think that all these things are holding them back from actually living the life that they want. It's not, it's you, it's in your head. You are the director of your life, you're in control of what you're doing. You can't just stand around as a bystander. If you
yeah,
think that you're like golden handcuffs because your job pays you a lot of money, dude, guess what? Like, if you drop dead tomorrow, your job's going to be posted before your eulogy. Like, like go and live your life. It's so short. So, like, the book really is to inspire people to not get stuck in life. Women or even anybody, and I don't know how much you know about the dating scene this time around. Like, it's terrible dating. But to have hope and not to settle for less because there's somebody out there for everybody. I truly believe that. And like my book is a testimony of that. So
but yeah, I mean, I've never been on a dating site because women are just knocking on the door nonstop. I'm kidding. Actually, I'm very
hallelujah.
familiar. In fact, I've lived in 9 states like you. I've lived a lot of places, and it's funny
Yeah.
when I tell people I lived in 9 states, they're like, "What are you like an ex-con? Are you a fugitive?" Like I'm like, "No, I just was in a field that took me different places, and like it's just very interesting to me." So no, and that's another thing. Maybe we'll do another episode on the dating just because I'd love to hear your perspective. It's a
I've got such
fascinating
a perspective.
the dating app world and there's new apps now called well I don't want to promote them, not that I don't want to promote them, but I don't want to give too much away. We can talk about it, but there are these apps where you meet strangers for dinner, which are all over the world. Well, what can I say? One's called Time Left. People don't necessarily love the name. I think it's a fine name, but a guy in Paris created a app that has you meet every Wednesday, whether you're in Bangkok or Sydney or Moscow or Las Vegas. There's communities of people meeting perfect strangers in their neighborhood for dinner. It almost sounds dangerous to some people, but it's a blast.
No,
I meet all these new
yeah,
people. It's a great networking in person kind of
I
thing.
love it.
I think that's the next thing. In fact, I don't want, I'll tell you offline. I don't want anyone to steal my idea that I want to share with you, but the dating app
Look,
market is fascinating.
I listen, I would love to go down the rabbit hole in dating because listen, I just turned 40 a couple weeks ago and I got married a few months ago. Okay, so prior to that, I've been in the dating scene, and especially once the dating apps took off. Look, for me, because I was in a sales role my entire life, I didn't go into it like as most people, like fear-based. I remember, I mean, I've been on hundreds of dates. I kind of would look at it like the best, and I talk about it in my book. I talk about it kind of like I would use every date like my own personal Joe Rogan podcast. Because no matter what, if you can just open your mind and get to know people and just have a conversation, like you're not going to a date because you're expecting to marry the person. You're just opening your mind, getting to know somebody interesting. That's all it is.
So you'll laugh at this. I said this on another podcast. Fortunately, well, I don't know. I don't mind if people hear this. Dating apps like in Los Angeles or New York, there's 10 million people in LA County. So like for those people growing up in the Midwest, or I'm from the Midwest, but if you still live in a small town in the Midwest, I was from a pretty big town, but city, um, you know, you need a dating app. It's impossible to meet people, and it's very hard in the big cities to meet people because there are so many people. But anyways, on my dating app profiles, I use that as marketing real estate.
Heck
I'm
yeah,
a guy, so it's safer for me to put my full name and whatever. But I'll put my
100%.
full name, my websites,
Yeah.
Instagram, whatever. I mean, I might as well get something out of this if it's becoming hard to get people to connect. So yeah, the dating apps are going to evolve, I think, so that they get more engagement. Uh,
Yeah, look, I mean, I thank God every day I'm out of that world because it is. I mean, everything's fast paced, everything's fast food these days. I didn't believe it, but when I was living in Hawaii, all my buddies told me, they said the dating apps out there, you basically go on there to figure out who you're going to sleep with that night. And that's what it was geared towards. But I think the other thing too is like you can utilize a dating app because now you can just like, Recruiter does or whatever, we can filter things down. You
a
can have
woman.
prerequisites.
I got a woman reached out to me, or we connected on some app the other day, and I said, "Have you been on a podcast before?" I invited her. We're going to meet for coffee, but I invited her to be on my podcast because she had an interesting story to share. And I mean, yeah, I think you get it. Perhaps you may think that's a little over the top, but the point
Now,
it's everything's a networking opportunity.
everything is a networking opportunity. I say that over and over and over. That is life. It's all about networking. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And guess what? There could be opportunities and doors open to you that you never even knew existed just by connecting with a stranger. Like life is beautiful that way. And if you walk around being optimistic to it, especially when it comes to dating, if you're optimistic about meeting somebody interesting, like, dude, that's going to do it. I mean, I met my handsome husband living on a rock in the middle of the ocean. And like, let me explain something to you. Like, if you want to look at probably the worst possible places for dating, it's living in Kona, Hawaii. It it was the impossible. Like for me, God did the impossible, and He did bring me the absolute perfect match for me. Perfect match. Because when you're 39 years old, well, when we met, I think I was like 36, but when you're that age and you don't have kids and you're single, you almost think you have to settle for a guy that has kids and has been married and, has a lot of baggage. But no, like we came together, perfect time, and everything was wonderful. So the problem that I had with the dating sites is that not everybody's authentic. So I like a dating site because you're going to rule out some basics, right? Like a lot of women are like really obsessed with height. I think that's stupid. But like mine says must love dogs, right? So you can filter what you want, but I'd go out with guys, they would share that they had dogs on their profile. We'd be on the date and then all of a sudden they'd be like, yeah, well, my kids will tell me. And I'm like, and I'll pull out my phone. I'm like, you never mention on your profile that you have children. Like, what are you hiding? So, I think that's why the one thing that stood out to my now husband, because we did meet on a dating app in Hawaii, is that before we met up when we were there, I called him on FaceTime and he'd never seen that before. Because for me, I was like, well, let me just see, if he looks the same, if I'm going to get catfish. And I didn't do that to everybody, but to him, that stood out. And why not? Why not have, well, you know what I was thinking about? Remember back in the 90s, they used to have like higher expectations, or SNL had like lowered expectations where
Mhm.
they would do the video and you talk about yourself. Why don't they go to that for the dating sites
Right.
where you have to
There's
have
an
a short
incentive for
video?
them not to match people up, I understand, because like they want to bring people on and they don't want people to get off the site. So I'm sure they have a lot of clever ideas that they know would work. They're just not using them. So
Yeah, that you're on here forever. It's
right,
eternity.
right.
Man.
Well, thank you so much. I definitely want to have you back on and talk about dating more in detail because it's a fascinating world and you can bring in the networking component. So, how can people get a hold of you, your book, uh, share a little bit of that information so
Yeah.
people will connect with you?
And just so you know, I do talk about my dating history a lot in the book because what I tell people, if you look at my social media, it looks like my life is butterflies and rainbows and me and my handsome husband, but it wasn't always like that. It's been a rough, terrible road. The book, I get very, very raw. A lot of it is just me crying my face off to the point where I can't breathe and my eyes get swollen. Like it's a real deal. Like I get very raw. So I could be found LinkedIn, obviously, as we've said it before, is my absolute go-to. I could still be found as Kelly Dockrell Brown, Acclaimed Recruiters. Um, and then, of course, my book, Acclaimed Journey to Aloha, is actually sold on Amazon. It's only like 20 bucks. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. I have a publisher, Westbow Publishing. It's only been released for about 2 months now, so there's not an actual press release. And yeah, I mean, I'm very easy to get a hold of. Of course, I still have my last name, Dockrell, but in my heart, I'm Kelly Brown.
Well, thank you so much. It was fun having you. You're a great guest. Um,
This is
And
fun.
again, I love the fact that you have your name and your logo on there, like you know how to market. So I appreciate it. So let's talk again. And thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. This is fun.
Thank you. We'll catch up soon. Oh, it's not letting me usually,
Are we still recording?
yeah.
It's funny because I'm sorry that you're in the dating world, but I do respect the way that you found the woman and you're gonna, bring her on